Welcome to another interview as part of the series Artists' Insights, interviewing artists based in and around Scotland and the north of England, aiming to dig a little deeper into their work, style, processes, and thoughts on the art world. This week's interview is with the incredible sculptor Simon Griffiths. In this written and video interview, Simon answers my questions concerning his career, achievements, and the wider world's interaction with art in general. It's a fascinating interview, and before you read on, I would just like to say a massive thank you to Simon Griffiths for his participation and eloquently put responses. I hope you enjoy it, and if you'd like to see more content like this and interviews with artists including Jill Walton, Alan McGowan and Katie Edwards, go to www.artistinsights.org. Did you always plan on pursuing a career in the arts?
Not really. So I had always drawn and painted and made things and carved stuff and built sheds and played with Lego and stuff like that, but I never thought that that was the kind of thing that you might do to earn a living or as a job. And growing up as a kid in the 80s in the northeast, you were never gonna be an artist. That wasn't something you would be encouraged to do. So I kind of put that out of my head, and I was in my early 30s before I realised that you could actually be an artist. That was a thing.
Can you briefly outline the process making your sculptures entails? What attracts you to this process or way of working?
So the process I use is I try and keep things as fresh as possible. So if I focus in on detail too early, I make the sculpture really boring and flat. So my process is designed by me over time to keep things exciting and stop me finishing things. So the way I work in clay, that one's probably, you can't see underneath it, but I make a newspaper core, so that just has newspaper and sellotape underneath, which just makes a very basic anatomical shape. I put clay over the top of that, and that's literally just lumps of clay pressed into sheets with my hands, put on to make a very rough shape, and then I apply lumps of clay, kind of pellets, maybe like the inside of the end of your thumb, something like that, very wet clay with my fingers, like this, and just a very few tools to finish off. And the process is designed to keep it as unfinished as possible, as late as possible. And then, because if I finish it too much, I can't go back and unfinish it. So it has to remain sketchy for as long as it can, and hopefully I stop before it goes too far, if that makes any sense.
What attracts you to the subject of nature and wildlife and motivates you to make it the focus of your work?
Yeah, that's an easy one. Wildlife has always been my thing more than making things. Since I was a tiny kid, I was always into it. I could have been a wildlife filmmaker or something like that. The wildlife came first, and then the making came second, and that's never changed throughout my entire life. I still feel exactly the same now. I get more pleasure from seeing a common bird in the garden, just a robin or a dunnock or something like that, and hearing them sing, or seeing the light play off his feathers or something like that, than I do going to a big art gallery in the middle of a city. It's just, I still find it exciting.
And is that also partly because you live in the countryside?
I think maybe because I was raised in the countryside, but I have lived in cities, after sort of leaving university and things like that. So I've worked in all sorts of other things, and in a city I find wildlife even more exciting because I don't see it often enough. So I get a real kind of, I don't feel like me if I haven't seen wildlife or if I haven't been in wild places. So I've now moved back to the country because this is where I like to be, but I found wildlife even more important when I wasn't in the country.
Has your style changed or developed throughout your career?
Yeah, I think it has. It's not a conscious thing. I'm not sure if many artists change their style consciously, so there's no jumps. I think it just progresses naturally. I've been doing this for nearly 20 years, and what happens is as you get more knowledge and you get better at what you do, you become more confident. and I think your style just reflects your abilities, really. So my style has become looser, definitely more sketchy as time's gone on, and it's conscious in that it's something that I want to do, but I haven't made myself do that. I've allowed myself to do that by changing my working practices, so I've been able to be looser and fresher.
Do you directly work from life, photography, your imagination, or a combination of the above?
Yeah, all of them. You would struggle a lot to do wildlife sculpture if you could only do it from life. See, definitely, and it's very difficult to draw most truly wild animals because they're never there for long enough. So you have to use photographs. But then, if I only worked with photographs, the work would end up being quite flat and still. So it's very important to have a very broad knowledge of the wildlife and of the real things, but not. I don't go out now and kind of, I'll choose a subject, say that I've got the grebe here. I won't go out and study grebes and kind of draw grebes and paint them and work up a sketchbook and then make a sculpture of a grebe. It's all knowledge that I've accumulated over time. So because I've been into wildlife since I was tiny, I've built up all the knowledge. I have filled sketchbook after sketchbook with sketches of wildlife, but it's kind of now all in there. So I will, if possible, if I'm going to do a sculpture of an entirely new animal, I will try and see that animal or bird. But I won't necessarily sketch it there and then, but I would really like to see it. Then I'll use photographs and any other reference material I can get.
And do you keep a sketchbook day to day? And if so, how do you use it to inform the development of your work?
No, I'm not a sketchbook person at the moment. I don't have an awful lot of spare time. I used to sketch a lot. Certainly as a teenager and a university student, I sketched all the time. I don't know, because of the way I work now, this is kind of a sketchbook which then turns into a finished work. So I sketch as I'm working and I work things out. And often the sculpture doesn't necessarily work straight away. Sometimes they'll be scrapped, sometimes I'll start again. Sometimes you can kind of sketch it and you can see where you're wrong and then you start again. It's not, I don't know, I'm not a painter, so I don't know how painters work, but certainly in a drawing, you kind of have to get it right straight away, because it's hard to rub a drawing out and start again on a clean sheet of white paper. It's a bit different with a sculpture. You can literally just tear it all off and start again. So you can keep the bits you like and get rid of the bits you don't like. But this is a sketch, so this is kind of my sketchbook. I do make maquettes, yes, so you're right, I suppose, there. So yeah, I've got some in there. So here's, for instance, a couple of ravens. So that, I hadn't actually thought about that, but yeah, they are effectively sketches, and I will sometimes make maquettes from life because they're so small and because you're not. Again, with the drawing, you're making the drawing and then the animal moves. How do you carry on the drawing that you've made when the animal's in a different position or it's not there? But when you're making a maquette, the animal moves and you just kind of turn the maquette around to see the bit that it's moved to. So a maquette's actually easier. A three-dimensional sketch is easier to do than a two-dimensional sketch. I'm a bit dusty at the moment. So yeah, there's a box of maquettes there. I've got loads of other ones all over the place. Yeah, I hadn't even considered these. These are just kind of, they're almost just in my head, but they are sketches.
Some of your sculptures, particularly the owls and foxes, appear to have a very textured, tactile surface. Is this layered approach in order to mimic the texture of feathers and fur, or a conscious stylistic decision?
So that technique, it's not done to represent fur and feathers. It looks like fur and feathers. It's done as part of, so what I was talking about before is it's deliberately kept loose, because if I don't concentrate on the finished article, if I keep it loose and sketchy all the time, I think it's a more interesting work and it stops me getting too tight. But the main purpose of that when it's finished, so again, if you take this one as an example, if you look closely at it, it doesn't actually look anything like fur or feathers. Well, it wouldn't be fur because it's a bird, but feathers, that in no way looks like feathers. What it looks like, because you're not describing exactly what's there, you're giving a suggestion or impression of what's there, you are leaving something to the imagination of the viewer. And what that does to me is it represents life. So there are areas that are unfinished, there are textures, there are shadows cast, and your brain, I think that your brain fills in the parts of the sculpture that aren't explicitly described, and that makes something appear more alive.
What are you trying to capture within your sculptures, and is it intrinsically linked to the medium that you use?
It's all about life, really. It's about that feeling that something, I can't make it alive, but that there's some kind of life force in there, that I have in some way imparted some of myself in there, that it has something of the living thing in it. And if you look at it that way, I'm guessing this is what you mean by the question, that if you take the Bible and man was sculpted by God out of clay, then these are sculpted by clay as the stuff of life in many ways, and clay, and more than any other sculptural material certainly, can take the impression of the artist much quicker and more fluently than anything else. So if you were carving stone, for instance, you can imagine how slow that process is. When you're sculpting, you can make a mark in clay, in soft clay, that is almost like a brush stroke or a charcoal mark or something like that. And so that already has life, that motion, that swirl has life. I've imparted that life into it. So it's the passing on of life, it's the depiction of life that I find interesting.
Does your approach to working with bronze differ from your approach to ceramics? And if so, do you have a preference?
Yeah, I much prefer ceramics. It's a similar process. You don't have to, if you're making a bronze, obviously it's going to be cast in bronze. So I still work in clay, and then a mould is made and it's cast in bronze. So it's the same process in that way. You're not making it hollow, because a ceramic piece has to be hollow, otherwise it would blow up in the kiln. So you don't have to bother with the paper inside and that kind of thing. But at the same time, there's something about the finished surface of ceramic. It's an original, it's more interesting. Once you make something in bronze, it's the finished article is taken away from you, there's a third party. So the finished bronze isn't the same as the thing that I originally made, my master. It's as close as can be made, but it's not the same. I didn't make the bronze. Therefore, ceramic is more interesting because it's more like a painting in that this is straight from my hand. So I much prefer ceramic than bronze.
So you have a bronze cast at a foundry rather than you doing it yourself?
Yes, it's a way. There's a few people do it. It's a very complicated and costly task to be able to do. You need a lot of equipment. So it's not something I would really consider doing myself. You need a professional to do that.
And some people who work in bronze work in wax. Do you not like working in wax?
Wax is great. It has a strength wax once it's good, because you warm it and then work it, and it goes hard. As soon as it cools, it goes very tough. So you can make much more elaborate shapes with wax, but it's very difficult. Wet clay has this tactile thing where you can move it around a lot, and wax isn't the same at all. It's a much more resilient material. So I find clay more interesting. It's much more like paint. Clay is more like paint. Bronze, wax is, I don't know, it's sticky and stiff and hard to work with. It's not the same.
What's the most important lesson you've learnt during your career?
I think it would just be to follow your gut, just to do what you think is the right thing to do. You have the advantage as an artist of not having an employer and not being an employee, so you're not told what to do in that way. Therefore, I think you should take advantage of that as much as possible and follow your gut. You know, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do, the freedom you have as an artist. If you then follow the market or do what you think other people would want you to do, you've lost that freedom. So.
Do you think the value of the arts is overlooked in society?
Yeah, it obviously is. You know, creativity is probably the most important thing that we've got. So a country like ours, which no longer manufactures anything, without creativity would be nothing really. You know, our music, our literature, our visual art is known throughout the world as being some of the very best in the world, if not the best in the world. How we manage to do that with the present education system we have, I have no idea, because it's very, very poor. We still do. We obviously have a lot of creative talent. I don't think we nurture that in anything like the way that we should do. If we did, who knows what can happen. But yeah, it's massively underrated.
If you could own one artwork, what would it be?
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure. A Rodin would be nice. Maybe a painting. Lucien Freud, something like that. Jenny Saville. Something big and bold and splashy and exciting.
If you could leave a legacy behind, what would it be?
I don't know. I'm not a big one for legacies, really. I think if you question, it was a slightly different question, and you said what would I like to be remembered for? Maybe it would be as somebody who led a fulfilled life and passed on that happiness to others. But I think I'm not interested particularly in becoming famous or in my work being known in the future. Art's a verb. It's something that you do, not something that you look at. So I'm a doer.
How have you been finding lockdown? Has it affected the focus or process of your work? And have you got any new exciting projects on the horizon?
Not many exciting projects at the moment. I've been asked to do another exhibition in France next year, which is that's fairly exciting. Not a lot of new work. I do have to earn a living, so I'm in the process of kind of making work to earn a living. As far as lockdown's concerned, I would guess maybe a lot of artists say the same. We don't kind of mix with that many other people anyway, so you're in your workshop doing your work, much as you were before. You're doing different work because you're not. I normally do a lot of ceramic shows through the summer, so you're going to these big events, you're meeting lots of different people. Those have all gone this year, so we've had to find different ways of meeting customers. We've had to make slightly different work because it's had to have been sold online, which means that it's been a lot smaller, so it's changed in that way. But as far as the kind of process of doing things, not a lot has changed really.
And have you done any shows this year?
Yeah, we've had one show this year. As far as I know, it's the only ceramic show that's been on. That's Potfest. Potfest normally takes place in the middle of the summer. We had Potfest in the park in September this year, and I believe that Potfest Scotland has just been on this last weekend, and there's still one more Potfest to go, which is Potfest in the Pens, which is Penrith, which I think will be at the end of October. If you check out the website, you can find out.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with Simon Griffiths. If you'd like to find out more about Simon's work, visit www.simongriffithssculpture.co.uk or check out his work on Instagram at Simon Griffiths Sculpture. If you'd like to see more content like this featuring artists such as Jill Walton, Katie Edwards, Alan McGowan, John Bray and many more, subscribe to this blog, follow the Instagram page at artists_insights and keep up to date by looking at previous content, sharing with friends, liking and subscribing.